When it comes to the two teams that advance to the NBA Finals, abnormal is the new normal. One team, helmed by the most unconventional mover in the NBA, also defies conventional wisdom on defense, overhelping and swarming the ball with just as much unpredictable efficacy as the league MVP's next step. The other team, meanwhile, makes room for each other as a team with shape-shifting adaptability that mirrors their oftentimes fluid relationship with how often and to what degree they sink toward the ball. Both teams are small markets. Both teams will apply loads of ball pressure. And both teams have some guards who play like bigs and bigs who play like guards. But overall, they are mainly only alike in how much they are different, both with respect to each other as well as the rest of the NBA. Let's talk about it. Joining me to talk about it, my favorite talker, my favorite basketball writer, talking about a series that projects to get weird, at least in my opinion, Samson Folk.
Very excited to cover this team on a finals run that they've not had in 25 years. What a small little blessing that you invite me to do this stuff, and we just so happen to get an Eastern Conference Finals run and then a finals run out of it. Wow, really cool. And I adore the Thunder as a team. I adore the Pacers as a team. For me, if you were asking me what like the best matchup could have been out of a possible however many there was in the league, I don't know the math quickly off my head, 29 times, whatever, 30 times, whatever. This is one of my favorite outcomes. I'm excited to dive into it. Awesome teams, awesome players.
So what I plan for this preview is Samson and I both have some things that we definitely want to touch on as we're talking about both teams. But at the end of May was supposed to be my monthly mailbag. So I put out the general call on Patreon for people to send questions. Of course, there was a lot of questions about the Oklahoma City Thunder, and some of which that I felt were very relevant to introduce this particular matchup. So that's where we're going to start. So the first question, Paul, Glenn, and March, which of these statements is more true? The Pacers haven't faced as good or ball hawkish of a defensive team as the Thunder, or the Thunder haven't faced such a complex or fast offense as the Pacers.
I think probably the Pacers haven't faced as good or ball hawkish of a defensive team. And the Cavs, I thought, they were a top 10 defense. They have significant strengths that they try and point teams towards. The Pacers undid them, of course. But considering, I know the Nuggets weren't like the best offense, but Nikola Jokic was quite impervious to the strengths of how the Thunder like to rattle other teams. And, the Thunder got quite a test against him in particular, and the Thunder, and Gordon being such a great cutter, the Nuggets, I should say. I think probably just by proxy of 68 wins versus 50, if you think the Pacers can win this series, hell yeah, good. But you have to respect the fact that the Thunder are historic, basically. This is a hell of a team that the Pacers are up against.
I think we can probably look at it from both sides a bit. I lean in your direction. And that's probably just some of what my watch bias is, because of course I'm watching the Pacers offense regularly. Mm-hmm. So I have a gauge for what the different defenses have looked like throughout this run. So I think we'll just start there. And this is some stuff that I noticed about this is going to be a different level of defense than what they've faced to this point. So as longtime listeners of the podcast know, the Pacers really like this touchscreen play with Pascal Siakam that they call C to try to get a switch. The Knicks did not actually switch this. OG goes back to Pascal, but they like using the entry pass on the reversal from Miles Turner to Siakam into the low post. This was one of the most efficient actions that they ran in their playoff run last year. Pascal doesn't actually finish this. He starts to lose his footing a bit, but they get that pass in there fairly cleanly. Same exact action against the Milwaukee Bucks. Siakam has the mismatch against Gary Trent Jr. Aaron Nesmith's defender rotates over to double. Now it's just going to be a wide open corner three from Aaron, although he does miss it. Now let's watch it against the Thunder. So the Thunder are going to do a lot more switching than both of those two basketball teams did. And they're also going to be, because they are very physical, very hands-on defensive team, it's not going to be as easy for Siakam he's excellent at staying lower than his defender to get these switches and to manufacture them and open his hips for a passing pocket. But you can see there that he gets fronted. He doesn't get the pass, which is okay because the Pacers have counters. Their offense is very rarely one and done. So they drop into that stagger to get Benedict Mathurin, but the Thunder also switched the stagger. So now they've taken away both of the main options. They reverse it over to Pascal, over to Tyrese, and now kind of like when you and I talked about with, or actually it was a thing that you brought up to Benji, where you were like, if the optimum outcome of a Knicks possession is a Josh Hart 3, what is the optimum outcome of a possession for the Pacers? And he said Tyrese dancing with the ball late in the clock. I think for the Thunder, the optimum outcome is trying to jam in a pass to Miles Turner against a mismatch between 3 and 10 feet late in the shot clock. And I think that showed up through many of these things. So that's what they ultimately get. Just another look at this in March when they ran that exact same play against OKC. They're trying to throw it over the top, similar to Milwaukee. The Thunder are going to help off the corners a lot. They're very, as I mentioned, unconventional with their help principles. They're unpredictable with their help principles. They get away with gambles a lot because they are so locked in with what help coverage they do provide. And I would say there, like when you're playing the Thunder and why it's going to be different, they're going to have to be more active, which they have this in their back pocket to be setting flares on the backside. So it makes it harder for
Yeah.
that defender to help over. But that's the first action that I'll look at. I have like 3 sets of these that I think are going to pretty clearly show what the differences are here, but I don't want to just like be talking into infinity. So if you
What
want to say something.
Yeah, just quickly, the Pacers have practice today. I want like they've obviously looked at this stuff. They'll be prepping this stuff. I wonder how much they incorporate. Like these are some of the looks we're going to see. Miles, be wary of playing cat and mouse a little bit more often if you can. Guys like Nemhard is, just in this will come down. We'll talk about the Siakam matchup in particular because that looms extremely large. But all the tertiary guys to beat this Thunder team, to spray to the corner, to get the great shots that you want, you do have to play a little bit of cat and mouse. The reads won't be as rote as they have been in the past. And so being mindful of that as passers down the roster, I think it looms extremely large.
The next play that the Pacers have run throughout the playoffs, and just to show, like, obviously turnovers are kind of death against the Thunder in terms of how they get
Mm-hmm.
going the other way. The Pacers call this through. It's basically just like Horns flex, where you're going to see Tyrese set that flex screen and then come back up around to the top of the key. The Knicks don't have great answers for keeping Tyrese out of the paint when Karl-Anthony Towns is guarding, although Tyrese did miss that shot. Same exact play against the Thunder in March that they're going to try to run. You'll notice a switch. He's not going directly downhill out of the handoff. They try to go to a step up to Andrew, which is the next trigger point in that play. A switch again. They don't get anything out of the step up. They ghost it to try to reignite the offense. They don't get anything out of that. And then it's Andrew having to attack, which he does draw a foul late in the clock. But again, it's showing the first option isn't there. The second option isn't there. The third option isn't there. So, and then on top of that particular play, this is the 77 skip one that you and I have talked about a lot, which was a counter for them putting OG Anunoby on Tyrese and him able to easily get downhill when Mikal Bridges was focused on pushing Andrew in the chest over there in the corner. There cannot be any miscommunication about what plays you are running. Like you can see Miles Turner right there telling Siakam he's making the motion because they call this slice, like run slice. Well, they're so delayed in getting it off that the ram screen doesn't happen in time with the ghost screen from Aaron. So then the skip pass never actually occurs. There's a lot of confusion about who's rolling where. And then again, a late clock possession where it's a mid-range face-up for Miles Turner between 3 and 10 feet. Like that's where a lot of these possessions keep tending to get funneled. And then just for people, Thunder fans who might be listening to this and being like, well, Chet Holmgren didn't play in either of those 2 games. That is correct. But he did play against the Pacers last year. So here's that action when they tried to run it against the Thunder last year as a counter for the face guarding from Lou Dort. And again, the Thunder are switching it. They were comfortable with putting Chet Holmgren out of the ball so he's not getting downhill out of the get handoff. Tyrese could have drawn a foul there when he had Chet up in the air, but there you go. Miles Turner, turnaround, face up, jump shot from 3 to 10 feet.
Miles, I heard. So, what do you think? Like you said, what the Thunder want to do is have the Pacers try and squeeze passes into Miles and have him decision make. Just temperature check. How do you feel about Miles there? And like, it's the Charles Barkley thing. Pascal, he doesn't let a little guy play him. How do you feel about Miles, who had some post-up success against the Knicks, has had post-up success just by proxy of how the Pacers play? How do you feel about possessions coming down to that?
I think it's the differences in the roster because, like I said, these are stocky guards and forwards who have more length and they push him out further from the block. So when he gets into that 3 to 10 foot range, he's shooting a career low from that area of the floor. And I do expect that the Thunder are going to cross match that a lot. It's not only just going to be the switches. I think it's pretty likely that Jalen Williams is going to be guarding Miles from the start of this series so that they can be switching Jalen Williams onto the ball with Tyrese. So the Pacers have other things that they can work around that. It's not like they're completely dependent on high pick and roll between Tyrese and Miles Turner. We've seen that throughout the series. But I don't want that to be the end of shot clock default for the Pacers. Like if I'm the Thunder and I'm forcing Miles Turner into shots from between 3 to 10 feet, like I said, I think that that's the optimum outcome of the possession. If I've worked the matchups and I've worked them past option number one, option number two, option number three, because the Pacers are better than, in my opinion, any team at stacking actions early in the clock. And what we just watched, which is why I agree with this person who set this question, like, is it we weren't even really looking at the ball hawk aspects there. I was just looking at the switch versatility and the help concepts. I I don't love it, I guess is what I would say. Like I might get some points there. And the game in March, Hartenstein did not play in the second half. Chet Holmgren was out. They started Kenrich Williams. That's who guarded Miles. They force fed it to Miles a bit. He got some shots off there. Eventually, the Pacers were like, we don't like this look anymore. We'd like to go smaller and play faster with Obi and Siakam. And as unfortunately for them, that is when the game got completely out of hand because there was absolutely no rim protection for how fast OKC can run the ball back in the opposite direction. So I think, I mean, I'm sure that we'll talk about the double big lineups later, but I'm almost more bothered by the lineups without any centers on the floor.
So this makes me think about Siakam because if the Pacers are looking at it like we don't want to force that much into Turner, and the Pacers are also looking at Pascal and saying this guy had the most efficient play in all of the 2024 NBA playoffs, his post up. He averaged like 23, 24 points per game in the Eastern Conference Finals last year against the Celtics team that while the Celtics do not play the same way as the Thunder, if you're thinking about like Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, it's an okay facsimile of the types of defenders between like J-Dub, Caruso, Dort that Pascal will be posting up against if he gets those matchups. How do you feel about Pascal being like the major screener, screening for switches, screening for mismatches, and going from there?
It probably depends on what direction the Thunder feel this out from the start. I don't know if they will start double big or not. They've played
Mm-hmm.
double big against Minnesota for reasons that make sense. If that's the case, then I expect that Hartenstein's going to be guarding Pascal Siakam from the get-go. And that was a very favorable matchup for Pascal during the regular season, and it was briefly when you and I covered the Knicks series last year when they tried to cross-match that,
Yep.
I believe, in game 4. Maybe, yeah, game 4. Um, so there's that, but this is, and you and I talked about it off the top off air, but this is also the like only team that I saw this year that put their centers onto Aaron Nesmith. And Aaron Nesmith is a different player now than at the time in which that was necessarily occurring, although it was in March. But like he's continued to make strides in these playoffs. I don't know if you would be as willing to chance that given that Nesmith, Nemhard, and Pascal have the highest effective field goal percentage on threes of anybody in the playoffs right now. And he's also been a far more active screener than when the Bucks tried that against with Brook Lopez guarding Aaron a year ago in the playoffs. So I don't know if they'll go to that, but that would then dictate how willing I think I would be to just be like force feeding possessions to Pascal in that way. Because we talked about it. That's not really something that the Pacers necessarily do. However, when we get into the overall defensive ecosystem organism of what Oklahoma City does, that does look like the most favorable soft spot to me. So it's kind of a give or take there. Like if it's going to stall out possessions and then you're going against OKC's half court defense, and like that clip that I showed out of the C action, if you're not doing anything to occupy how much they're going to pack the paint against him in the post, then I don't necessarily love it. But if it's organic to what they're doing, and depending upon whether they cross match it or they don't, then I could see that as being something very favorable for them. So the other half of the question with regards to whether the Thunder have faced such a complex or fast offense, between, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, the Timberwolves, the Pacers will by the number play more 5-out pick and roll than any of those other teams will, and not just the actual stationing of bodies to run 5-out pick and roll. They're going to be able to run more lineups where all 5 players on the floor have to be respected from 3 than what the prior 3 opponents were putting out there. So a stat that stands out that I'm sure is getting tossed around a lot, in addition to the Thunder being so good at forcing turnovers and the Pacers not turning the ball over much, is that the Thunder give up the highest frequency of corner threes of any team in the NBA, and teams shoot a decent percentage against them on corner threes as well. Meanwhile, the Pacers, top 10 in the league at how many passes they throw to the corners per 100 possessions, and a high percentage of those passes lead to shots from them, to the point in the 2 games against OKC, they threw the equivalent of the 3rd most passes to the corners. The Pacers are the best corner 3-point shooting team in the playoffs. So that feels like a pressure point for them potentially, especially because Tyrese, which I should have talked about with the defense aspect there, because of how much Oklahoma City packs the paint, he did not is paint touches on his touches, how often he got to the paint when he touched the ball, were slashed completely in half against OKC. He barely touched the restricted area against OKC, and his drives were like 8 per 100 possessions. So they want to play paint to great. If he's not getting deeper into the paint, he is a player who's very successful at playing in the high paint and throwing the skip pass against the scram rotation and beating the timing. That's something that we've talked about on this podcast. However, and I will throw this back to you as I pose this question, how often do you think the scram rotation is actually going to be there? Because this is something that I tossed around while I was up in the night thinking of this matchup. Because at first I was like, Tyrese will pick that apart. He'll pick the taggers apart. He'll pick the scram when they're trying to, get the small guy off of Miles or Siakam. But then the longer I thought about it, I was like, I don't know how often that'll happen. But I would like to know your thought on that.
You think they'll go chalk, just switch, no scram?
I think.
Yeah, that probably makes the most sense from their perspective. And honestly, if the Thunder are looking at weak points, and this is, I think the public saw it, like the public consensus was like corner 3-pointers. I cover the Raptors. Corner 3-pointers become obsessions for fan bases very quickly. Is like that could be a tipping point if they're looking at it and they want to just like eliminate that as that big variable, and knowing that Tyrese is the best at finding and locating those passes, like as we discussed earlier, going down the roster, having guys, maybe the Thunder won't be as, I guess, like on point navigating those. If they're doing it against Miles Turner, they might be more inclined to like take a risk, try and read him early. But I mean, just kind of like letting it go chalk, sticking to a switch and trying to have the Pacers enter through the post on a perceived or real mismatch probably makes the most sense. But it would change the shape of what the Pacers are trying to do probably.
So just a basic ghost screen from Ben Shepherd. And then he's cutting through to try to create that double gap there if Tyrese had gone in the opposite direction, but Tyrese rejects the screen. They didn't actually switch it, so they didn't actually need to scram it. And then because of some of the length on the ball against Tyrese, you can see that the passes to the corners aren't always in the shooting pocket. So it's not like that one's going to directly lead to a shot. But that's definitely what the Thunder are willing to give up when you watch a lot of these games back, which makes sense because, like I said, the Pacers are a team that preaches paint to great more than about anybody. There you can see Shea already going. They put 2 on the ball against Tyrese. They exit out. Tyrese makes the right read. But how do you feel overall about the Pacers playing through the weak side more? I mean, obviously that's something they'd be comfortable with, and if that's available to them.
I don't mind it that much. Like even Ben had basically 3 options there, right? You can take the shot, you can swing it quickly to Jarris and move the ball on, or you can put a dribble down and create like a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, even a 3-on-1 based on if the Thunder are still stacked on the opposite side of the floor. And the Pacers, if ever there was a team who does a pretty good job of filtering through that stuff down the roster, they'll, like, I suspect that they'll do better. The question really is whether those guys, because this is the question, like, have the Pacers faced this before? Is this going to be like a total change of pace for them? This isn't the Knicks, this isn't the Cavs, this isn't the Bucks, this is the Thunder, and having your tertiary guys make plays down the line, continue to read the very aggressive and amoebic Thunder defense and to make the right reads against it, knowing when to take your shot, be aggressive, put a dribble down to manipulate further. We saw they weren't perfect at it. There were times that they overpassed. There were times that they kind of got a little bit away from the drive. It's just, we'll see. It's a big ask. But if ever there was a team, or if there was a team this year that's capable of it, I would think it would be the Pacers.
Something that I tossed around in my head too is that because the Thunder do so many, word I keep using, unpredictable things as a defensive team, they will stunt and help from the strong side corners. They will tag from places that aren't what you expect. They'll high tag rather than low tag. They'll mix those things in. Sometimes they'll over help because they trust how locked in they can be as a help defense. That's how they can get away with gambles in the way that they do. They are a very weird basketball team, which then leads me to think that it's somewhat, and I'm not intending for this to come off as a totally pessimistic podcast. We're going to show other things from the Pacers, but like it just makes me think that it's almost to the Pacers' disadvantage that the NBA Finals, of course, are going to be against a Western Conference team, but they only played them twice. The fact that they only got to feel this out twice and without Chet Holmgren on the court, I think is going to be somewhat of an uphill climb
They
in that
won
direction
they
as far
won
as attacking and
68
defense.
games.
Yeah.
68 games, and they didn't have Chet for however long. Like, this team is extremely impressive. They're not infallible, but they are not that shy of infallible. They do have the profile of one of those teams that's like just destined to go win. The Pacers, however, were counted out in a lot of series. The Pacers have been underrated. There are some statistics that point towards some things. And guess what? Scared money don't make money. The Pacers have been in the heat of it, man. And everyone on that roster has had to take shots at different levels. The Thunder have had, I guess, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What a saying that is, by the way. But the Thunder have had probably streakier stretches from three. There are things in that Thunder offense that the Pacers, who have been a better defense than people expected, can pressure. That might lead to runouts. But this has been a very half-court centric conversation. And the Thunder, they're trying to keep it there. But it's like the Thunder are the odds favorite by a heavy, heavy favorite, and they deserve to be. However, I mean, you got to play the games, man. That's where we are.
Do you think it all works? I mean, this wasn't part of the rundown that I showed you, but talking about wanting to try to avoid the half court and getting bogged down there, do you think the Pacers can play as effectively fast against this Thunder defense?
I think the Pacers are better in a fast game than the Thunder. I'll be honest there. I know the Thunder, their pace is higher. I know the Thunder do like to play fast, but I do think that the Thunder are better at the counterpunch of slow than the Pacers will be. So the Pacers should try and keep it up. Obviously, the Thunder do not pursue the offensive glass in the same way that a lot of teams do, so that there's not going to be the same opportunity to run out. We saw that with the Bucks, for example, like the Doc Rivers mantra of not really pursuing. The Pacers.
Can I hop in right there for a second
Yeah.
and just ask another like kind of follow-up question? Sorry to interrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I kind of wonder in that regard that because the Pacers only average 12 turnovers per game and
Yeah.
these two against OKC, the Pacers have been very good at being a low turnover team. Of course, the Pacers still lost those two games despite the fact that they didn't turn the ball over a lot. But I wonder if the Thunder will evaluate that calculus and be like, look, our tried and true method of winning the possession war through the fact that we don't turn it over much either, but we turn over our opponent a lot, leads them, especially if Hartenstein does play. This feels like a utility area for him where I'd just be like, crash everything, bud. Because like we already saw him in a game against the Pacers for the Knicks last year, get 12 offensive rebounds in a game with Miles Turner opposite of him. He had 17 rebounds in that basketball game just to add to their possession total. And like what you just said, I also wonder if the Thunder will evaluate that calculus and be like, look, a better way to slow the Pacers down is for us to crash and make them stay with us rather than us trying to get back.
Well, what's interesting is that the Thunder are the heavy favorite. They aren't the underdog here. why would they blink first, and change? Which also gives the Pacers this unique chance to come out in a different form a little bit with a new wrinkle in the first two games and try and steal something here. And that's underdogs always have that ability. Like you can change form earlier and do something truly unique. Um, I would be surprised if the Thunder changed type at the outset. And maybe that's something they do mid-series if the Pacers, like maybe you get like a fun wrinkle game from the Pacers and you get a bad shooting game from the Thunder, and then one a game one or two gets stolen. But yeah, I think in regards going back to the pace, I think the Thunder, the slower it is, the better it is for them, because as you mentioned, like the Pacers managed to keep their turnovers low in games one and two against the Thunder. The big thing was that Tyrese paint touches cut in half, two of his lowest usage games of the season. We know that the Pacers at times can survive that. We know how the Pacers can run offense outside of that, but he is the engine of the team. And the biggest thing that swings this series, quite frankly, isn't the Siakam mismatches. He has to beat those, and he probably will. But it is the efficacy of how they get Tyrese loose and if that's a possibility. And playing fast gets him loose.
Yeah, they still got off as many advanced passes against OKC as they normally would, as being the top team in that category. So that is at least positive. But I guess my head just kept going back to what happened in the second half of that game. That when both teams ultimately felt it was better to go small, the pace ended up favoring the Thunder. And there was nothing the Pacers could do from a rim protection standpoint when they
That's
took Miles Turner off. Like
OB.
Jalen Williams destroyed them because as soon as he became the ball handler, there was a lot of confusion between Obi and Pascal over, like, at times who was picking up the ball. The Pacers really didn't have anybody they could put on him, and it was 11 straight points that he scored or assisted on. It was basically like game over. Like, so I guess it depends on lineups to an extent. But yeah, I think I agree with your overall um, general sentiment there that obviously if they're playing slower, that's better for the Thunder defense in the half court against the Pacers. Next
Mm-hmm.
question. How would you want to guard SGA? I personally think Nemhard is one of the best players to guard SGA, but I think giving a bunch of different looks would be best to keep the Thunder off balance. I know he's a strong fouler and a mid-range merchant. Maybe you coax him into taking some threes, which he's less willing to take. Which players should get a chance to guard SGA alongside Nemhard? And just to provide context, he in these two games scored 31 points, had 8.5 assists against the Pacers on over 70% true shooting and 35% usage. And he also tallied 43 drives and 2 basketball games.
So the big thing is, if the whistle is really friendly, if the referees are like, and I don't think this counts as ref talk because I'm not whinging or complaining, but if the referees are kind of like, let's let these guys play, Aaron Nesmith becomes viable, I think, because he's physical. He'll put hands on, and if the referees are less inclined to allow touch fouls, which are valid, I'm not going to complain about Shea's foul drawing. There's a possibility there, but I will say that I think it's Nemhard has to be put on the cape a little bit, for the same reason that there's a nobody said it had to be Nemizi shirt that Caitlin has merch in the bio probably of the podcast. Nemhard has almost an otherworldly ability to feel and track where his check is on his body and to not lean or disrupt or do anything, just to cover space and to take it away. Chair pull, which everyone discovered, and thanks to Caitlin. However, is there another guy like Ben Shepherd? Contain some of this stuff is reminiscent of the Brunson matchup to some degree, in that if you keep him in front, he shoots over the top. I cover Team Canada when they play. I've seen Shea do it in a smaller court against big defenders. You can stop Shea and pen him in, and he still can score 37 points. It's tough, but it just has to be Nemhard and Shepard probably. And Nesmith, if the referees are like, let them play, we're trying to see some great basketball,
I would like to know from a shoe expert how often it's happened in the NBA finals that the top defender from one team is guarding the best player on the other team, and that defender's wearing that other player's shoes.
Hmm. I'm sure that has happened. Like
Like he's
there's
wearing that guy's signature shoes. Like I just think that that's like kind of a fun little nugget from this, given how much Andrew and Shea were close. I know during the Team
yeah.
Canada run, and that he wears those.
I mean,
But
I'm gonna when they become available, I'm buying Shay's shoes. I think they're the shroud over the top, like zipper. I could care less, but he's the Canadian MVP. Oh, Canada, So
interestingly enough, not to have a long brief aside on this, but I am pretty curious because I know that you worked at Foot Locker, which was also my dream
mhm.
job when I was growing up. So, what is your favorite pair of basketball shoes that you've ever had or played in?
Ever played in probably I really love the Kobe 10s. I played in like 3 pairs of those. I wish I had bought a bunch when they were there because now Kobe's are worth a gazillion dollars. But I really love the Kobe 10s. Right now, I play in the Harden Volume 5s. They took forever to break in. They were a pretty poor shoe, honestly. But they've come around after like I've had that shoe for like 4 years, and I've been playing in it for like a really long time. My favorite shoe ever probably is the Jordan 4s. I really like Jordan 4s. Uh, but yeah, that's the Kobe 10 is probably my favorite shoe I've ever played in. Like very comfortable, fit my foot really well, really good court feel, traction was awesome, just great shoe.
My favorite pair that I ever had and played in was the T Mac lows. I really liked those a lot. I had the red and white ones. And then the most recent pair that is my favorite is the Sabrina ones. That is a
Mm.
great shoe. Big fan. I was like, first of all, that would have never been available to me when I was growing up. And second of all, like the amount of actual support that is inside of that shoe by comparison to what shoes were like 10, 15 years ago is pretty crazy. But that was a long aside. Hopefully, people didn't care listening to it. I had to get the Foot Locker employee's expert opinion because I never achieved my dream of getting that job. But
A
in
quick
terms
a
of,
quick thing on top of that, though, if you're listening to this, the chances are that the shoes you wear, if you're a man, are a little bit too big for your foot. I measured a lot of feet at Foot Locker, and men always want to size up when you don't have to be
really,
doing that. You don't maybe you're not a size 10
what's
man.
the
It's
thought
okay.
process there? This is interesting.
Big feet are manly, and guys want to wear a bigger size of shoe. It just is what it is.
So they don't care that their foot's going to be sliding all over while they're playing basketball. This sounds like a recipe for blisters to me.
Caitlin, you don't understand what men will endure.
I don't. I don't. That's correct. So the actual matchups for the Pacers against Shea, as Samson pointed out, 69 for Andrew Nemhard, which was by far and away the most of any player on the roster. The only other player that really did any direct matching up against Shea was Ben Shepherd. Tyrese had 10, but that was because he was hunted and switched on to Shea. So that was it. That was the long list. I think more importantly, and this is a somewhat philosophical question that I want to broach here that I promise has nothing to do with shoes, is that to me, it's less important to a degree who's guarding Shea and how many players are guarding Shea and where those players are helping from. So, in contrast to what we saw against the Cleveland Cavaliers and against the New York Knicks with Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson, like just to provide people some context, because I would like to continue to reinforce that, yes, Donovan Mitchell definitely lit up the Pacers in terms of how many points he scored. Jalen Brunson did as well until Andrew Nemhard had one of the best defensive performances of all time for a Pacer in Game 6, is that was somewhat a deliberate strategy by the Indiana Pacers, especially against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They wanted to sap the lyricism out of Cleveland's offense, especially around the pick and roll. That was the number one pick and roll team in the NBA. They were like, we're going to pull the nail help back. We're going to risk that more usage is going to go into Mitchell's hands and that he's not going to be creative enough as a passer to find passing avenues. The Cavs vastly undershot from three versus what they did in the regular season. I think that is in part why, although defenses don't directly impact 3-point percentage, but they do impact the location of shots and who's taking them. And the Pacers ranked in both of these series. They averaged fewer closeouts per 100 against both New York and Cleveland than the 30th ranked team in the NBA. So they were not showing much help on the drives from Mitchell and Brunson. However, against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the regular season, they showed help on 81% of Shea's massive tally of drives, which would be like the equivalent of the highest help rate in the NBA if only looking at that matchup. And Shea still performed quite well. So from that aspect, when you're like talking about Aaron, my only thing there is that I think Aaron's almost going to be imperative against Jalen Williams because the Pacers also don't have a lot of matchups there. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, this is why it feels like it's going to have to be like Nemhard, Nemhard, Nemhard. Other than the fact that I think the other most important person in this conversation, which not to heap more on him based on what we already talked about offensively, is I think it's going to be Pascal Siakam because Siakam's going to be far more in his normal defensive role in this matchup than in the prior three when he's having to guard Cat and he's having to guard Giannis. I think he's going to be on Lou Dort. I think they're going to be like, you have to be helping everywhere and
Yeah.
trying to corral Shea to an extent. That's
Can
my general feel on the series.
can I posit something stupid?
Of course, yeah.
So
I
Shea
doubt it's stupid, but continue.
so Shea scored 31 a game. He
Mhm.
drove 43 times over 2 games. They showed help on 80%.
I know.
Why not just say like maybe you score 43, maybe you score 44.
You think they might do the same strategy again?
Maybe you stay at home. Maybe Nemhard will be in Nemhill himself, perhaps. Like maybe you say, look, you're wearing his shoes. You clearly respect this guy, and we respect you so much that we're gonna leave you on an island, brother. I don't know. I
This is why this is the
if he does
philosophical question I wanted to ask. This is why I wanted to get
mm,
your thoughts because I think it's very interesting because you could be like, let's just do the same thing that we did against Mitchell and Brunson and hope that by the end of games he runs out of gas and that we're going to stay home on everything else because he's already lighting us up and we tried this during the regular season, which like not to rehash a ton, people can go back and watch the other podcast, but what the Pacers did against Donovan Mitchell was not what they did in the regular season.
yeah.
That was like when you're talking about a different wrinkle in game one, that was a vastly different wrinkle in game one. When we were talking about the war at the nail, I thought they were going to show a lot of nail help and they might need to adjust in other places based on how the Cavs rotated around that. So this is on the table, although the difference being is Cleveland's shooting was otherworldly during the regular season and you stay home on that, it makes sense. It impacts the types of shots they got. If OKC's shooting is the shaky thing. So it really is. That's why I wanted to bring this up in terms of which philosophy do you buy into here?
Both.
You think you need to alternate?
I'm trying to see both because the Thunder, I don't think, are the best passing team, obviously. I also think that Shea, if there is one thing that you can critique him on, it is that passing creativity. And he's the MVP. And I'm a Canadian boy who's watched his whole career. I watched Shea's very first preseason game. A huge fan. I said he was going to be an MVP when he was in year 3.
This is a very Canadian NBA Finals. It really is.
Yes. Yes. The one thing he is not incredible at is passing. Everything else, just unbelievable marks. He's very resilient. But I think you want to see both. You really want to see both. And maybe that means you're seeing neither. I don't know. But it's up to Rick and the staff, you know. And Rick has pulled a lot of the right levers. And that's part of why I'm like, I don't know. It could be closer than people think. Like the it's man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
We'll start this podcast and be like, OKC in 5. By the middle, we'll be like, OKC in
Pacers
6.
in
It could
7.
happen.
Yeah. It takes some talking. It takes some unbridled optimism.
It takes
But
enough of my harebrained ideas to be like,
yeah,
this
yeah.
might just work. But to show a few of the possessions in terms of what we're talking about here.
Is that a
And
chair pull I see?
I mean, we're showing it, Samson, because I think this is the most impressive one that there was. Just because, like, this is not me trying to downgrade Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson, but Shea is on another level as a driver, even by comparison to those two. And for Nemhard to predict that particular step to the point that he falls down, and then and this is not ref analysis, but it is funny to me that he looked at the ref when he fell down when there was clearly no contact there at all because Nemhard pulled the chair. This is a special skill that he has. There is a shirt made off of it, and I did write about it 3 months ago, just pointing that out. But beside the point, there's going to be a lot of hand-to-hand combat between these two as they are wearing the same pair of shoes. And they're not showing any help here, Samson. That is all Shea, Nemhard absorbing it all, which, Nemhard had a phenomenal, as we mentioned, that's what he effectively did against Jalen Brunson in game 6. So we shall see. But there, when it's a switch, it's a screen between Dort and Shea. The Pacers were comfortable switching that between Siakam and Nemhard, which is good. But then you see that Nemhard's going to come right back off of Dort. They're trying to show an extra body once Shea gets closer to the basket rather than out further above the break. And that's kind of what I noticed a lot is a lot of the helps coming from sync rotations other than I just want to say right now, please don't try as what has been the case in the prior series. We don't need to see if TJ McConnell can guard Shea in this one. So Jarris all the way off practically in a next there, and Shea's still drawing a foul between basically three bodies there. But you can start watching Siakam here where he's all the way off of Lou Dort, which Shea's at the top of the key, so that's not the best example. But I did want to show that they're going to have Siakam in low places a lot of the time. That's why I said a lot of the coverage, I think, is going to be somewhat dependent on him providing that shadow presence again. But there, look at that one. That's not even Dort over on the left wing, and he's clearing the paint to try to bait the mid-range shot rather than allowing Shea to get a bit deeper, which obviously Shea is very good for mid-range as well. But it is a little bit of a mixture there. We did see possessions where it was just like Nemhard go to work, and we did see possessions where that's really exaggerated help. So
Garth Brooks defense. I got friends in low
I titled a
places.
section of the title. I titled a section of my defensive overview on this team in December with that line. But
Wow. And based on what you showed, that's all the film, I presume. So they didn't actually shoot that well. So the Pacers, they should just do what they did there, and they can maybe Shea score like 11 or 12 points in
I
a
thought
game.
those were the best. Because I knew that I wanted to bring this up to you and get your
Yeah.
opinion on which extreme version you preferred, and those were the most extreme examples of it that I saw. And also, some of the drives were coming after the game was far out of hand in Oklahoma City in the second half. So those ones weren't, I felt, as valid given what lineups were on the floor.
Yeah. I think you have to be ready for both. And honestly, just before this happened, before we did this, I was watching the Raptors 26-3 run against the Bucks in game 6 of the 2019 finals
That
run.
seems like a normal thing to do, but
Yeah. And it is that it's being able to, the great defensive teams or teams that are truly great do have an uncanny ability to, yes, problem solve, but also to toggle between their problem solves for when, it's like, man, Ersan Ilyasova took a lot of threes and none of them dropped in, and Brook took a three, and Middleton took like a fading three to the corner and nothing happened. And then Giannis took his turn being like, I'm going to try and force the issue, and none of it worked. And the sequencing was wrong for the Bucks based on how the Raptors were playing it. And sequencing is really important. That's part of what makes Tyrese Haliburton so special as an offensive decision maker. Sequencing this correctly for the Pacers on making Shea go a little bit more like, man, this is like 5 possessions in a row. Do I really want to go 5 in a row? Maybe I've missed twice or something like that, because he shot 60% on his pull-up middies, which is like insane. But he can miss. We saw him miss. And maybe it's 2 or 3 possessions in a row where they got the right shot, but it didn't drop in. It's a tall task, but it's a task. Herculean, perhaps, but he completed those.
next question. I always enjoy when we get questions where it seems like very obvious to me that people are following along with the podcast journey very intently. So, this one from Craig Lindemann, you'll cover this directly or indirectly, whether I ask or not. He knows me well because I would have. But to my eye, the Mikal OG matchups on Tyrese and Andrew that we saw in games 5 and 6 is really good prep for what's in store with the Thunder. Is that a reasonable assessment? Are the solves, air quotes, from game 6 relevant for OKC?
This is a tough one because Mikal, I don't think there's a comp for him on the Thunder. Like I do think, or I don't know. I like you go ahead drink, but I will swing it back to you. We both talk for a long time. When I do the live streams, I'll go like an hour without a drink, and then at the end, I'm like, "There you go, dude." But I don't know if it's great prep. I'll be honest. The Thunder are a different beast, which is partly what we addressed at the top. I mean, it's prep in that they saw different players and that they've been adaptable throughout the playoffs, but I think it's a brand new thing with these Thunder. What do you think?
I think it's a brand new thing, but I think that the bones of it merit our discussion in that I think that the Thunder's pressure is going to be several levels above what Mikal Bridges was applying. And the fact that the Knicks didn't really go to that heavily until game 5 is still a very perplexing thing for me. And why they weren't letting Deuce McBride do it is still a very perplexing thing for me in those lineups. But that is water under the bridge. Aside from that, water under the bridge is, I don't know.
Well, the Knicks fans have destroyed the bridge. Bridge is caved in, collapsed.
Is that in the sense that what that represented was we're going to use one defender to face guard Tyrese as much as possible, and we're going to use our strongest defender to defend Andrew Nembhard. That was still a new concept that I had not seen. And I do think that the Oklahoma City Thunder can replicate that and do it better than what the New York Knicks did. Which brings up another interesting conversation in that I strongly think that Lou Dort will start this series guarding Tyrese Halliburton. I think that he will pressure him the full length of the court. I think we're going to see a ton of face guarding. But there is reverse scenarios possible here where you could use Wallace to face guard Tyrese and put Dort on Andrew Nembhard. And in the past I have referred to Lou Dort as the king of the underworld because he is very good at ducking under picks and still getting back out to contest. So in the same sense that OG was ducking under Andrew and how that was rewiring their offense, and this is where we'll get back to the Siakam conversation to an extent, that meant that's why we were seeing the first possession of the game in game 6 being an inverted pick and roll for Pascal, because that was going to be where the more advantageous pressure points were going to be. I think that the Thunder can do this, and I think that they could do it with multiple different people if they wanted to. If they play double big, maybe they don't do it as much, but even then you could put J-Dub on Nembhard if you wanted to. But I definitely think that they can, and I think that the solves are going to look somewhat different if the Pacers find them, because the Thunder are not going to be as bad, I don't think, with their transition defense as what the New York Knicks were in game 6.
For the Pacers, are you happier with Pascal having an easier matchup to eat against, or for him to eat a really difficult matchup that allows more pick and roll play up top to like flow for Nembhard and Halliburton?
Like, do I want him screening for Nembhard, or do I want them entering the ball to him? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, basically.
I think I'm more comfortable entering the ball to him, because I have too much respect for what the quality of the pressure is going to be. So just to provide, I'll get your thoughts on that after I show these few clips here. So just in case like people didn't listen to the prior episodes against the Knicks, maybe we have some Thunder fans that joined us, which welcome Thunder fans if you did. Mikal Bridges has both hands on Tyrese Halliburton, OG guarding Andrew Nembhard over on the other side, which, again, just to reiterate, this is very different than what the Cavs did when they were having Okoro and Strus face guard Tyrese, and then Nembhard was getting the easier assignment, which would have been, Garland, Merrill, sometimes Donovan Mitchell, which was why the Pacers were so comfortable tilting so much pick and roll to Nembhard and Miles Turner in that series. OG then taking the steps that even when they had Brunson on ball, he was, he's going to be ducking under. He's going to duck under this handoff, keeping the ball out on the perimeter until it finally gets back to Tyrese with, 6 seconds on the shot clock. And he's wanting that screen to be able to finally get Karl Anthony Towns. And now it's a very off balance grenade that he's heaving up there. By comparison, watch Lou Dort with Tyrese. Like, that's basically like Tyrese has a barnacle on him the full length of the court. Even when they want to reverse it to him, there's like, he's working to try to get open there, and they're not, like, the ball isn't going there. This is from the game in March. Obviously, it was a little bit worse than the game in December, although I will say, like, a lot of it did get pegged on the Dort assignment after that game, but like, Dort was out. Tyrese had different matchups. The Thunder played quite a bit of zone, and there were some times in the fourth quarter where they ended up putting Dort on Siakam, where I felt like that was kind of in the portion of the season where there was times where Tyrese as a driver was stopping himself a little bit more than the defense was necessarily stopping him, which I think he's made some progress with. But like I said, even when Dort was off the court in the December game, here's Wallace space guarding Tyrese, and this is something that I absolutely love that I shared on Twitter last night. Pascal, to your point, like, do you just want to enter more touches to Pascal given these scenarios? He's the pick and roll ball handler against the cross match from Hartenstein. Tyrese is pushing his face guard assignment like a football sled and sandwiching it as the pick and roll screener, and Andrew Nemhard is setting the stack screen. So it's a completely inverted Spain action, and then Siakam is making a pull-up three against the center. Like, this is why I say this series is going to get weird. And like, Siakam had possessions where he was just the bring-up ball handler. Like, the Hartenstein matchup was very favorable to him, which is why, like I mentioned at the top of the pod, they ended up putting Hartenstein on Jarris Walker, and that was a little bit, created some issues because trying to get the wing entry pass there against the mismatch is more difficult for Jarris when the guy's sagging off and Jarris didn't even touch it. Kind of daring Aaron to shoot where he has 1 foot in the paint. That's a bigger dare now than it was then. But I think that's kind of what you're getting at in terms of like why I think both of us are kind of projecting that like this might need to be a lot of Siakam.
Yeah. It's you in the playoffs, you have to maintain your identity, yes, but you also have to be able to attack the other team's weaknesses. The Thunder will definitely try to do it on the other end. And the Thunder's identity is more like attack weaknesses based than the Pacers is. But the Pacers have been malleable and adaptable. They've slowly crept up. They've toggled between a lot of Siakam and not that much. Everyone always raves about like they're not even running plays for him. They do, but definitely not as often as they run for like guards and stuff. You're gonna have to. I think you have to toggle it up probably to the highest it's been in the playoffs. And like here's the thing.
That's why I thought the same in Game 6 against the Knicks. That's genuinely why I did, because I'm like, he's going to have the easier pathway to offense here based on what the Knicks had done.
And he's the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He's a max player. He's
That's
a champion.
Right. Never forget that Eastern Conference Finals MVP.
Exactly. He opened up his first ever finals game. He went for 30 plus on Draymond Green on 14 to 17 shooting in a fast-paced offense that included hit heads. He hit a championship winning shot over Draymond Green. He had 26 and 10 in that game. A lot of it built out of him being featured as a screener, making decisions against Hall of Fame, one of the best defenders ever. Pascal, game in and game out, is he going to be infallible? I doubt it. But it's not a bad situation to be in saying, like, that's the guy we might swing it to. Because there's every possibility that Pascal can outpace J-Dub as the number 2 in this series. Of course, it may not happen. J-Dub could easily be the second best, like the best 2 or whatever the hell. But Pascal can rise and hit that high water mark and stay there for at least a few games of this series. So you have to look at it. You have to consider it really heavily. And he has not been shook at all. He's been very good, very composed as a decision maker and scorer.
Well, alas, I am still me. So, in being me, while I was watching this film, I was thinking to myself that a lot of what I was seeing is that the Thunder kind of represents an amalgamation of a lot of the things, the little things that have bothered the Pacers throughout this run. And maybe because those were things that bothered the Pacers earlier in this run, maybe they have that experience to draw from now, and perhaps it will be better finals now that they've seen them. But in addition to that potentiality of what one of the things the Knicks did that bothered them, which was putting a stronger defender onto Andrew Nembhard and doing the face guarding, this Thunder team is going to run a lot of guard screens, Samson. And I fear that this might be a repeat back to our old beat, which was Giannis, AJ Green, inverted pick and roll quite a bit. So just to put it into numbers for people, the Thunder did run the most guard screens per 100 possessions in the regular season. That number is slightly below that mark in the playoffs, but still quite high and still a lot more than any other team. So Isaiah Joe not playing a ton of minutes in the playoffs right now. But I must say that when I'm looking at some of the rotation players, I'm like, he could be an agent of chaos here.
He could stir up something for sure.
So to go down memory lane on the inverted pick and roll, just to remember what that looked like, however many weeks ago it was that we were still talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. Tyrese guarding AJ Green. What the Pacers were doing oftentimes was before AJ even actually set the screen, and sometimes didn't set the screen, they wanted to show a hedge because they didn't want to give up the switch with Tyrese. AJ inevitably would leak out to the corner, and then that would draw the defender, the weak side defender, up from the corner, and then they were giving up corner threes out of this a lot. I don't think that the Pacers ever actually found a viable solve against that. This showed up in the game in March where there was a few possessions in a row where Tyrese is guarding Isaiah Joe. And I'll ask you what you think, but to me, it feels like somewhat incongruent coverages again because Jarris is opening his stance very early, which makes me think that he's thinking we are going to switch and I'm going to funnel the ball to you. And then he was going to reverse course and switch back out to Isaiah Joe leaking out to the perimeter. I don't entirely know, but I think that Tyrese thought I'm going to hedge and recover because I don't want to switch on to Jalen Williams. But it's the same exact outcome where you're drawing that defender from the corner and you're giving up open shots.
Good pass too.
And same thing. Like I have some concerns. Pascal, Herculean effort defensively against Karl-Anthony Towns in Game 6. Pascal is very important to what the Pacers do defensively, and I think definitely will be if he's helping off of Lou Dort. But the inverted stuff between he and Tyrese is not always the best, and you can see that he's like opening his stance too, as if he's going to funnel the ball towards Tyrese, but then Tyrese is like almost in a drop, and they literally get split by Caruso going down the lane. This is another case where it's not Tyrese involved, but with Ben Shepherd, they do just flat out switch it out, and that switch has to be so much better. I think Jarris is going to be out the first two games with the ankle, and hopefully, that can turn around for him because that obviously was not a high point of Game 6. But a lot of issues with the slot screens, the flat screens from various players for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I think that this is something. Obviously, they do it a ton, but they do it with a variety of matchups as well. So, in terms of, like I said, things being the Thunder being a representation of many issues that the Pacers had to overcome throughout this playoff run. That's point number one. Lots of guard screens from the Oklahoma City Thunder are about to happen. The next one, our other familiar beat, we're back to zone corner again. And I do apologize because I've talked about zone a lot on this podcast. However, I do find it somewhat relevant here because the Thunder were zoned more than any team during the regular season. They've been zoned a ton during the playoffs. The Pacers also were zoned a lot during the regular season, and something that has gone in opposite directions, which maybe by the end of this, I will have talked everybody into Pacers in 7. I think solely from this zone conversation, that's what's going to happen. But the Pacers have been better against zone in the playoffs, which everyone needs to remember. These are very small sample sizes because you're not going against a ton of zone. But we have seen them find some things against zone throughout rounds. The Thunder, mind you, have been worse on zone in the playoffs, and they've also been worse scoring against zone than they have been against man in the playoffs. Both teams threw some zone, over 15 possessions, I think, a piece against each other in just the two games. Not a lot, but some. Do you see this factoring into this series at all?
I think it's interesting that we use the term throw zone. I hear that everywhere. They threw zone.
Do you know what a pet peeve of mine is? when
Go
we
ahead.
say they played a little bit of zone? What does that mean? Like, is it box and one? Like, it's some zone? Is it like it was a man that morphed to zone mid possession? Like, anytime a team says zone, they're like, oh, they're playing a little bit of zone. But what is a little bit of zone? It either is zone or it isn't zone.
Yeah. So I expect the Pacers might throw a little bit of zone at the Thunder in this series. I wonder if we might see Tyrese in that little corner that he was in at the start of the season. I am pretty confident in Indiana's ability to score against the Thunder zone. I actually think that, they had to sort out the Cavs, but I think the Cavs were extremely well equipped to play a like devastating zone against the Pacers, and the Pacers sorted that out. So I
Yep.
think they can, like, Mobley and Allen is a beast to sort out in zone. That's really tough, and they figured it out. I think that they'd be able to do against the Thunder. What I'm less confident about is that, like, the Thunder wouldn't figure it out going back as well, but they could throw a little bit of zone.
The Nuggets threw a lot of bit of zone
Yeah.
at him in that 7-game series. So, really quick, just to show people a couple things, because I think I'm pretty much in lockstep with what Samson said just then on both fronts. This is, if I can get the clip to play, this is how the Pacers combated the Cleveland zone. A lot of the flare action between Tyrese and Siakam to get Siakam touches in the paint and be able to play make out of the middle. They screened Mobley at the top of it. The Thunder are not going to play a 3-2, but that action that you're seeing there with Siakam setting the flare and slipping into the middle for potential high-low passes, or as you pointed out many times when we were covering that series, just with Siakam being able to attack off the dribble from the middle more so than what some of the options were early in the season, is something that they'll still be able to do against the 2-3. But I agree with what Samson said, in that I think the zone look is probably more valuable potentially for the Pacers to play against the Thunder, especially given that I'm pretty sure that Shea has more touches against zone than everybody in the NBA other than TJ McConnell. And it makes sense that both of them are seeing zone as much as they are, because they both drive at a very high level per 100 possessions. So, like Samson said, Tyrese at the bottom. And one thing that I really liked about this possession is you can see that Siakam within this zone is very aggressive, getting his body to take away the pass to the corner and getting into that passing lane with his stance. And then what you'll notice is when the high paint flash happens, now they go to man. So Tyrese has manned up on the high paint flash, and now they're playing traditional man and switching on the ball screen. So you're kind of seeing three different types of defense and one there from the Pacers. That was, I would say, the high point of what the zone defense looked for them this season. I was very impressed with some of the possessions that they threw against the Thunder. So, like, I'm not going to say that it's like a panacea for everything, but if the Pacers are wanting to show a different look in the Shea possessions rather than just like heaping all the responsibility on Andrew Nemhart, I do think it's something that they could go to and should give consideration to.
Yep. It's one of the options that they can throw. It's something that they can do. The Pacers are not a vaunted defense, but they are the second best team in the whole of the NBA since whatever date it was after they sorted out their early season woes. They've been a much improved defense over time. They weren't like a dazzling defense in the playoffs, but they certainly did enough right. And they can throw some stuff at Shea. There's definitely things that they can do. But he's an MVP. He was voted as the best player in the league, and the Thunder are good outside of that. And the Thunder haven't got I thought J-Dub was pretty awesome in the Western Conference Finals. He struggled a lot against Denver. Hello zone. I don't know if that means anything, but I think Minnesota played a bit, a little bit of zone. I wonder how it
Minnesota
went
likes
there.
to play the 1-3-1 that morphs into 2-3.
I played 1-3-1 in high school. I was the bottom.
I
I
know
just
we both
run.
had this conversation once because we both played the
Yeah,
bottom of a 1-3-1.
yeah.
Because I still think that's like the most grueling thing you can do defensively is play the bottom of that coverage.
You run that baseline. You got to cover ground like crazy. Yeah, I mean, like some of this stuff is, if it just plays chalk, the Thunder have more advantages. But like I said after game 5 of the Eastern Conference Final Series, there can be some things, you can sort out some stuff, but structure is the playground within players' play. And the Pacers will have structure. Rick will come up with stuff. Mark will come up with stuff. But these guys got to go battle it out within that. Yeah.
I would say in summary, the Thunder are problem creators, the Pacers are problem solvers.
Well,
They
that's
do
good.
pose new challenges for each other that neither has seen yet throughout this playoff run. Both of them can also, in addition to the ball pressure, that they can both show a lot of different alignments. Both of these teams have been at the forefront of the guard and the dunker spot movement, both at the forefront of heavily using guards in the ways that bigs are traditionally thought to play. Both have floor spacing fives who can allow for those things to happen. That possession that I love with Pascal as a pick and roll ball handler out of Spain, crazy. So I guess what I will close this out and say in terms of the basketball conversation is I think that we're still going to see some really good basketball and interesting basketball, regardless of which way the series goes or how long the series is. I don't really care what the ratings for this final series are. Don't let the ratings fool you. Good basketball is about to be played between two teams. I think that this is a very intriguing matchup. Hopefully, people got that impression through the things that I tried to show up in the clips throughout this. And yeah, like I'm not going to give predictions because I don't really want to. I will do that on other podcasts if people browbeat me into doing it, but I'll let people draw their own conclusions based on the information that was presented. Because you know what? Pacers didn't win the regular season series against the Milwaukee Bucks. They didn't win the regular season series against the New York Knicks. Yeah, here we are. That's a team in the NBA Finals. So I'm not going to completely downplay or doubt what they're capable of doing at the next level when they've had time to sit and look at some of this with multiple days off and practice time and hurdles that they've already had to overcome that could later pay dividends for them in this series as well.
Also, a cool thing about this series is that obviously the mid range is such a like a massive aspect of how the Thunder score just by proxy of Shea and J Dub, honestly. And that for so long, people like quickly tried to like analytics hate the mid range. It's gone. It's like, no, that's not true at all. And the Pacers,
Analytics.
yeah, analytics. What a yeah. Anyway, you can go back to our last podcast, listener, and we have a fairly lengthy discussion on catch-alls and that kind of stuff. But the Pacers, as we've talked about before too, the post up was like, no, 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 no. Both these teams achieve a lot of things by hearkening to the past and kind of supercharging it. Areas of the court or play styles that may have fallen out of favor are suddenly very present on that, basketball's biggest stage. And regardless of ratings of anything like that, and of course, like if you care about ratings for your team or the NBA, I think that shows insecurity on your part. Things don't need to be popular for you to like them. And by the by, it's the NBA Finals.
If you're
So
listening to this podcast, you probably agree. Things don't need to be popular for you to like them.
exactly. Just like what you like and be proud of what you like. Trust your taste. But this series, I think, is going to create a ripple effect in how these styles are guarded going forward. It's going to ask the best of these players and the best of the coaching staffs that coach them. And as we often see, the NBA Finals is going to create strategical ripple effects down the line. These are two of the preeminent styles. You know, I think defensively the Thunder are setting the tone for the next couple of years. I think offensively the Pacers are setting the tone for the next couple of years. This series will determine a lot of the counters I think that we see throughout the regular season and by a larger percentage of the NBA. It's awesome. This is an awesome
You
finals.
might say, to harken back to that monologue I had, the abnormal is the new normal.
Jeez.
You might say.
Earth, you don't have to be crazy to like it here, but it helps. Or
I don't
whatever the
know if you
hell.
knew this, but I had as I tend to do once in a while, I had a somewhat snarky tweet, but not everybody knows this. But when the Thunder and the Pacers are competing in the NBA Finals, it's and it's ring night for whichever team wins, they're not going to raise a championship banner. If the series was enjoyable and compelling enough, a banner will be raised into the rafters with what the Nielsen ratings were instead.
Hey, son, that's where they make the numbers. I Yeah, people care too. I think that's a represent, not to get too much into the very much Samson bag that I like to get into, more so on my Raptors Republic stuff, but that that is a great avatar, that belief of like, well, is my favorite team popular? What are the Nielsen ratings? Is just like the brain rot at the heart of how we enjoy things in this day and age. Although you and I do not participate in the rotting of the brain. We're trying to percolate that daggum thing.
We haven't used a lot of brain rot words. I do find it funny sometimes when there's literal timestamps in the comments of words that we've used.
I think that was my biggest. I was like, oh yeah, Grady Dick, he's gonna be all right. They went up to all the Raptors players and were asking them about like the all the new slang and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of it was like the regressive stuff or just stuff that's just like mimetic and terrible. And Grady just like heard it all and he was like, yeah, it just seems like a lot of brain rot words. And I was like, he might have it. He might have it. I was like, he's got a good head on the, and also talking to Grady, he's got a good head on the shoulders. But I was like, he might really have it, man.
You want to know something funny? Somebody corrected my pronunciation of your name when I'm introducing you at the start of the podcast.
Really?
I haven't been saying your name right.
Is it? Do you say folk or folk? Some people say folk.
I've been saying Folk, but they told me, why would you pronounce it that way when his last name is Woke?
Oh, nice. Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. It's yeah. I have this deeply biblical first name and this third wave political last name. I am the melding of the two eras of the world. Yeah. Trey, for anybody who wants to know, I do a podcast with one of my best friends, Trevon Heath, and he and I always just create a bunch of different names and puns with our names that are meant to be a bunch of different things. So Samson Woke has been a holdover, I think, just for forever. And also, I can't remember. I tweeted something political, and somebody called me Samson Woke. And also, my good friend Joe Holbert also addresses me as Samson Woke. Like every time he messages me, he says Mr. Woke, like or Samson Woke. It's pretty funny. It's good stuff. Also, tremendous like for people who enjoy X's and O's. Joe Holbert on Twitter has like a whole slew of great stuff that he points out, and also of the mind that Caitlin and I are, that like names aren't important, where advantages are created is. And yeah, a lot of good stuff.
Okay. Well, I don't think I have a lot to add here. Hopefully, people enjoyed this preview of the NBA Finals. I'm also hopeful that my Wi Fi held up throughout all of this and that people heard and actually saw us along with the clips. But I will let you say whatever else you want to say in case you had another topic that you wanted to bring up of the basketball or the banter variety.
I didn't get a hard yes
Oh
or
wait,
no
I
from
I
you.
have one really quick thing before that we say that. On our last podcast, we were asked about what our favorite things about podcasting with the other person was. And I forgot to say that one of my favorite things is that you do make me laugh a lot while we do these podcasts. So
That's a running
continue.
theme. I care about, and you can ask like all of my friends know, I literally will do anything to make someone laugh. Like whatever I possibly can. Somebody called me a dork. And they're like, but you can tell he loves basketball. I was like, that's true. I'm a dork
Where
who
was
loves basketball.
this?
This was sent to me. But there was a Redditor who called me a dork, and I was like, you know what? Fair enough. Because
You just have like a personal Reddit reader who just sends you stuff.
well, no, but like people talk about you on Reddit, and then your friends will be on Reddit, and they'll be like, look what someone said about you. And then you see it's like, oh, you called me a dork.
I've
Which
called
is,
you a dork before. Did you think that I wrote the comment?
yeah, maybe it was you. Yeah, you're like, he's a dork, but he loves basketball. Um, Yeah, the username, now that I think of it, was Frim Gandango. Much to consider.
So
Uh,
it was
yeah,
it was Maltese Falcon.
yeah, yes, exactly. No, there's no way that's available. That must have been snapped up so quickly. Regardless, though,
And that's a
yeah.
funny Maltese Falcon joke if you knew what the meaning was. Like that had layers right there.
Well, I'm woefully unaware of the workings of that of that joke. What I want to ask you though, and thank you for saying I'm funny. Nice, that means everything to me. Uh, will Pascal? What's your temperature on him beating Caruso, Dort, J Dub, those guys? Do you think it's a yes or a no? Because I think that's a lot of people have feelings about that because they watched Caruso hanging against Jokic. They're like, well, if you can do it against Jokic, why not Pascal?
He held in against Randall as well. I mean, it's tough for me to say because I value past precedent a lot when I'm evaluating some of these things. And anytime the Pacers were playing the Bulls, Caruso never had any possessions against Pascal to my memory.
Although
He
he
was
had one dig down in overtime, got a steal on Pascal, then ran
oh,
to the corner and hit a triple.
okay. When he was still at the Raptors?
Yep,
Okay.
it's a
So
heartbreaker.
I apologize. I didn't remember that. But I think I lean that I lean in favor of Pascal here. I think that this could be a good series for him on both ends of the floor.
Yeah. I mean, he did against OG,
Yeah.
and I guess if you
He
do it
did
against
against every player of the New York Knicks
yeah,
in a different way against every player for the New York Knicks.
who
That will
wants that?
probably make Oklahoma City Thunder fans mad. I can hear it in the comments now. This defense is at a much different level than the New York Knicks.
Yeah, I do wonder how that goes, but yep,
Well, where do you think? Do you lean yes or no?
I lean yes. Now, does that change the outcome of the series? Probably not that distinctly, but I do think that Pascal will be able to get his.
Okay. We
I'm gonna
have that
get
a bit of
mine, you'll get
optimism that we
yours.
can hang on to.
I want to see sweat coming out your pores. You ever listen to DMX?
Not that much, I can't say.
In high
I
school, I
mean,
listened to a lot of DMX.
mainly the music that I listen to is typically when I'm writing, and it usually involves instrumental music, movie scores, or yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Or I'm listening to things in foreign languages typically. Otherwise, I get distracted while I'm writing. So it's usually what it is: foreign language
Wow.
music or instrumental movie scores.
Okay. Noted. I should close out the podcast then?
Sure.
Okay. I've said it elsewhere. I say it everywhere I go, but I'm probably listener, viewer, you've gathered from this that yes, Caitlin is the most in tuned and the best analysis that you can get of NBA basketball. She's the best basketball writer in the world. If you want to support her and myself and more work like this, you can go over to the Patreon, Basketball She Wrote. This is singular. There's no other work like this. This is going to be the best analysis of the finals. Tune in with us. We will appreciate it, of course, and we'll pay it back with as much work as we can muster. Thank you for tuning in, whether you got into this in the morning or at night. From myself and Caitlin, have a blessed day and goodbye.